The Thriving Doctor's Download with Lizzie Paish, a guide to finding peace of mind and accessing your full potential. Episode 3, Inside Out, Not Outside In, the key to experiencing greater well-being. What do you make of the fact that someone can be achieving great success, live in a wonderful place with plenty of material wealth, be surrounded by delightful friends and family, and still be feeling a sense of inadequacy, lack, dissatisfaction, or even despair? Another, with the same success, wealth, and relationships, is thriving. How can it be that someone who may be experiencing limited professional success, live a simpler lifestyle, on a far lower income, even experiencing problems in various areas of life, is contented and feeling a sense of satisfaction overall? Another in a similar situation is stressed and struggling. If you were to draw 4 quadrants, labelled simply as across the top, successful or not successful, and down the side, experiencing well-being and thriving, or not thriving, you'd be able to find candidates for all 4 sections, wouldn't you? I think we all know some of each of these people. Maybe we've even spent time in most of those quadrants ourselves. Perhaps you can notice that most of us live our lives as if practical success in life and psychological thriving can be achieved in the same way. Application, attention, hard work, more information and better strategies are our conventional ways to get more of what we want and less of what we don't. However, the current surge in mental health issues would suggest that this approach isn't working. In fact, practical success and thriving happen in quite different ways. There's no correlation and certainly no causation between what we deem success or achievement and our level of well-being. You've probably noticed that. However, there are predictable things that do affect our level of well-being. They're just not what our education and cultural conditioning may have told us they are. They are, in fact, lack of attachment to outcomes, a broader perspective, a more settled state of mind, and where we put our attention. When we do our best, but don't stake our happiness or sense of identity on any specific outcome, we free ourselves to experience our well-being, whatever the results, and even during the time it takes to discover what the outcome actually might be. Sometimes we can see what's happening in the context of our whole life, or even the context of the experiences of others, or the vastness of the universe. Like when we say, well, I guess it's a first world problem. When we take this broader perspective, we start to feel better. When we ruminate and think incessantly about our problems, our minds get more and more worked up and we feel worse and worse. But when we make efforts to take our mind off the things troubling us and focus on something else, something that brings us joy or a sense of calm, we experience greater well-being. Whatever your own favoured way of taking your mind off things, it isn't just an avoidance trick. It's actually a constructive way to increase your sense of well-being. When you feel better, you do better. Once your mind is settled, you come up with better answers. However, if you're convinced that you can't live in a state of well-being while certain conditions exist, then well-being will remain elusive. Some of your team may be annoying or less competent than you'd like. Resources are often short. The NHS is rife with myriad systemic issues. Your workload is heavy and your children may be confrontational. Given all that, most people would tell you it's inevitable that you're stressed, and we all tend to believe them. But despite all of these things, your experience can be, in fact is, variable. Some days, or maybe just hours or moments, you're absolutely infuriated by certain issues, And at others, your focus is elsewhere, and even if briefly, you're doing your job with flow and satisfaction. You're at different levels on the vertical axis of our graph, even while the overall circumstances remain the same. Your state of mind has the capacity to shift constantly. The more we recognise this, the more we allow our well-being to naturally re-emerge. At certain times, it may make sense to focus on shortcomings in front of you, if you have an opportunity in that moment to effect change. But much of the time, we focus on these things repeatedly, overthinking during times when we can do nothing to change them, such as lying in bed or having a meal with our family, at the expense of our own peace of mind. What if it makes more sense to focus away from our problems for most of the time? It seems to most of us that our experience works from the outside in, that given a particular set of circumstances, it's inevitable that we'll feel a certain way. But in fact, our perspective on what we see, the way we ourselves think and where we put our attention, actively create how we experience anything that's happening in our lives. Our experience, in fact, works from the inside out. It begins with us. If you're in the thick of circumstances you're finding difficult, this can sound both challenging and annoying. I want to reassure you that this is in fact extremely good news. Far from suggesting that it's all your fault that things are so bad, what this recognition points to is that it's far easier for your experience to change, and therefore to feel renewed well-being, than you may previously have thought. If other people, your job, or even the NHS need to change in order for you to experience greater well-being, then you have one gargantuan, not to say impossible, task on your hands. Fortunately, whilst by no means denying there are real issues that we're all up against, we do not need to change those things to find our way back to well-being. As our minds settle, well-being can naturally re-emerge, bringing access to clearer, wiser thinking to deal with the issues in front of us. I'll be sharing more about this and exploring it further in future episodes. Meanwhile, if you'd like to see some visual representations of the graphs and quadrants that I've spoken about in this episode, you can visit my website at lizziepaish.com.